G'day poker people. In the last video we covered my 13-hour grind of the epic $2022 every 40 minutes high hand promotion that the Seminole Hard Rock was running on New Year's Eve, and the very next day they were running the exact same promotion from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. So despite playing a monster session the previous night, I had a very quick turnaround to get back into the casino in time to try and grind as many hours of this promo as I possibly could. I slept maybe like 6 hours after the session last night, but I really wanted to get into the casino to try and avoid any waits to get in a game because I figured the room would be absolutely jam-packed with such a generous promotion running. So I got to the casino at 9:50 and this was already way too late. Literally every table in the room was already filled and the wait lists were absolutely ginormous to try and get into a game. So part of me was very tempted to just go back home and catch up on some of that sleep I didn't get last night. But I really did want to play as many hours of this promo as I possibly could. So I just waited by the poker room bar and got a nice refreshing club soda and watched the NFL whilst I waited for a seat. It ended up taking 3 hours of sitting out that bar. But then finally I hear, Lee, your 2-5 seat is ready. And I'm ready to get in a game, which is where I play this first interesting hand. Let's get it. So we kick things off with King Queen offsuit in the hijack. I go ahead and raise it up to 15. I get a call from a tight aggressive cutoff, and then an unknown player that I didn't recognize goes ahead and 3-bets me to 45. The action folds back to me, and honestly I think you should probably just be folding the King Queen offsuit out of position to two people in this dynamic. I'm getting a good price, which makes it more tempting, and folding is boring, which makes it even more tempting. So I do throw in the call here, as does the cutoff, and we're 3 ways to a flop of Queen 5-4 Rainbow. I go ahead and check it over the pre-flop aggressor, as does the cutoff, and then they go ahead and c-bet 80. The action's on me now, and look, if I'm going to play this hand pre-flop, I definitely cannot be folding on a king high flop for reasons that I hope are pretty obvious. I chuck in the call, and then the cutoff folds. So we see a turn, which is the 5 of hearts pairing middle pair and putting out a backdoor heart draw. I check it over to the villain, who goes ahead and bets 180. So I think we still have a pretty easy call in this spot. I will say having the king of hearts specifically does make things a bit dicier, since I think a lot of the opponent's worst kings that are betting are going to be ones with a heart draw, but still not impossible that they're continuing to bluff with ace high flush draws and 6-7. But do have to proceed with a bit of caution, do lose to ace queen and aces. And we've talked before about how Tampa 3-bet range is pretty tight, but really would be just crazy to fold king queen here. So I do throw in the call, and we get to see the river, which is the 2 of clubs. I check it over to the villain, and then the villain checks the pack, and now we're very confident we're good. I show my hand, and they end up mucking theirs. So hey, a nice little win to kick things off in this session. Let's see if we can keep the ball rolling in the next hand. So the Apple Overlords have summoned me to rise, so we're on the feet for this next hand. I'm in the cutoff with a Jack 10 offsuit. I go ahead and raise it up to 15, and I get a call from the button and the big blind. So we're 3 ways to a flop of ace 8-4 with 2 clubs. When the action checks to me here, I could go either way between c-betting and just checking. I mean, it is an ace high board, and we're going to have all the strongest ace highs, but if we do take all of our Jack 10 offsuit combos, I'm going to be bluffing pretty significantly, which is a dicey thing to do into 2 separate. So I just check, and then the button checks as well. So we do get a free turn, and I'm very glad we did, because it's the 9 of diamonds giving us an open-ended straight draw. The big blind goes ahead and bets 35, and I think with how we've played this hand so far, I kind of just have to flat here. I don't really know what a raise would represent except for pocket 9s and maybe ace 9 suited. It's just too narrow of a range to represent, and I don't really think they'll believe us if we raise here. So I think we just have to play our straight draw as a flat if we continue, which obviously we're going to continue for this prize. So I call, and then the button calls as well. So we are still 3-handed to the river, which is Queen of hearts, baby, let's go. We get there with our straight draw. The big blind continues to bet. They go ahead and make it 125. Now the action's on me, and my initial reaction is just like, raise this hand, duh, obviously, try and get value. Your opponent's actually representing a pretty strong range. I think they have a lot of 2 pairs on this board that you can get paid by. The one inkling that would make me want to like flat as kind of a trap is just to give the button a better price to overcall if they do have a strong ace themselves, because obviously that hand would just fold if I went ahead and raised. And raising here is a little bit face up when the obvious open-ended straight draw got there. So maybe there is some reason to just flat. I didn't do that though. I want max value from the big blinds 2 pairs. I go ahead and make it 300. Then the button does fold and the big blind calls, let's go. We end up showing the villain our nuts and they end up throwing their hand in the muck. So hey, pretty hot start to the session. So I was talking to a gentleman at the table. He told me he used to work HR at a smaller casino out in Colorado before moving to Florida. And he told me that on a busy Friday night, the smaller casino would make $250,000 profit, not revenue, profit from slot machines alone. And this was a smaller casino too. I can't imagine what a bigger casino like the Seminole Hard Rock or the Crown Casino in Melbourne would make on a Friday night from the slot machines. In fact, I just googled it and the Crown Casino has just over 2,600 on their floors in Melbourne. And the Seminole Hard Rock has 5,000 slot machines. So the profits they must be making on a busy weekend is just absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, I would recommend not playing slots. You know, if it's your thing and you have fun doing it and you know you're going to lose a lot of money, like, power to you. I'm not going to yuck your yum. But I'm just saying, at least you have a chance when you play poker. Slot machines, you're drawing dead in the long run. But back to the poker. We've got a $10 straddle under the gun and it falls to my button with King Queen offsuit yet again. I go ahead and raise it to 25 and I get a call from the small blind and the straddle. So we're 3 ways to a flop of a 10-8-4 rainbow. So pretty epic whiff. So when the action checks to me, I'm just going to try and take a free turn, see if we can make a pair. So I go ahead and check it and then we do get to see a turn and we don't make a pair, but it's still a good turn. The Jack of Diamonds putting out backdoor diamonds and giving us the open-ended straight draw. I'm noticing a bit of a pattern in these hands. Small blind checks, but the straddle bets out for 25. The action's on me and just like could copy and paste what I said about the Jack 10 offsuit hand. Just got a call here. The opponent does have a stronger range when I check the flop. So I throw in the call and then the small blind folds. So it heads up to the river. Is the ace of hearts. Let's go. We are doing great at going runner straight. And then the opponent continues betting into us, which we love to see. They go ahead and bet 75. And now I think I'm going to go ahead and raise with the nuts. It's just an interesting what sizing we want to use. The opponent has 450 in their stack. Are we going to go all in or are we going to raise smaller than all in? Looking back at this hand, I actually think it's a pretty clear go all in decision. I think the villain is going to have a lot of 2-pair combinations, a lot of sets as well, maybe even 9-7 for the dog end of the straight. So there's just so many strong hands that probably aren't going to fold to an all in. The only reason I would go smaller is if I did think a lot of their 2-pair combinations would fold to the all in, but I just don't really expect them to be able to fold those hands if I'm being honest. I made the mistake though. I only raised to 250. If I had this decision back, I would absolutely just be ripping it all in. Whatever the case, I do raise to 250 and I do get a call. I end up showing my straight and the villain shows ace-8 offsuit. So they did have one of those 2-pair hands. Who knows how elastic they would have been with calling or folding, but looking back, yeah, I think raising smaller than all in is a pretty silly mistake. Next up, we got the under the gun straddle on again, and I'm on the button again, Queen 10 suited this time. I go ahead and make it 25 again, and then a loose aggressive big blind 3-bets it to 80. The action folds to me, and I think getting this price and position during the hand, there's nothing to do but call with this hand. So that's what I do, and we heads up to a flop of Queen 5-3 rainbow. The opponent c-bets 50, and I throw in the call here. I don't really like raising with this combination in particular. Definitely somewhat concerned I'm behind since the opponent basically has all the king-queen offsuits through pocket ace combinations, and if they are bluffing with like an ace-4 suited or jack 10 suited, something like that, I want to give them a bit of rope and let them continue to barrel off on different runouts. So I throw in the call and we're heads up to the turn, which is the 6 of spades, putting out backdoor spades, does not slow the opponent down. They go ahead and bet 90. Now in this spot, things are getting a bit dicier here. Definitely still worried if we lose to all those potential combinations. But if the opponent did 3-bet, like jack 10 of spades, 10-9 of spades even, this is a great turn for them to continue semi-bluffing on. Ace-4 suited turned open-ended as well. And, you know, maybe they're over-bluffing to an extreme amount where they're using all the ace-king offsuit combinations. So don't think we can be folding just yet. I do throw in the call, especially getting this price. So we're heads up to the river, which is the Queen of Diamonds. Let's go. We do suck out on the aces and kings combinations. This doesn't slow the opponent down though. They go ahead and bet 280. Now, I found this bet sizing by the opponent kind of interesting because I think for sure a loose aggressive opponent would triple barrel aces and kings even on this river. Having said that though, I think those hands probably wouldn't bet this side. They'd probably go something like 200, maybe even less. That kind of deters me from wanting to raise here, just because even if they did take a larger sizing with aces or kings, like they've got to put me on a queen, right? So I don't know if those hands will call a raise. And then it's just like, okay, they can have king queen, they can have ace queen. I think a set's pretty unlikely, but it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world I've seen. So I do actually lose to some stuff here, and I don't think worse hands will call. I think it's very likely the opponent is bluffing, by the way, so there's no way I can fold, which leaves me with the one action I have left. Boy, I've played this hand really passive, but I do throw in the call. And then the opponent shows king, queen of hearts. So, okay, there you go. GG, nice hand. Bit of a cooler there, but I'm glad I didn't raise the river. I think that would have been way too thin. Next hand, the hijack open limps, and then a loose aggressive cutoff goes ahead and makes it 25. I'm on the button, king 10 suited, slam dunk 3-bet spot. I go ahead and make it 75. Then the limper folds and the cutoff calls. So it heads up to a flop of queen jack 6 with 2 clubs. So let's go. We absolutely smashed the flop again. What a monster draw we have when the opponent checks it over to us. I think we have the nutted semi-bluffing hand here, so definitely want to try and push our equity a bit with a c-bet. I go ahead and make it 50, and then the cutoff check raises to 175. Now I think it's pretty interesting whether we want to 3-bet or just call here. The main reason I would like 3-betting is we're going to have all the sets except for 6s in our range, the overpairs as well. I think those hands might want to 3-bet. So if we're going to 3-bet with strong hands, we need some semi-bluffs as well. Having said that though, I think flatting is probably a better play, and we should probably only be flatting here, even with our sets and overpairs, just to keep villains bluffing. It is a loose aggressive opponent, keep in mind, and also limit damages a bit when my opponent did flop a set or queen jack, which is essentially what they're representing with the check raise. So I throw in the call, and we're still heads up to a turn, which is the 2 of clubs. Let's go. We get there with our flush draw. Having said that, this doesn't slow the opponent down at all. They continue betting. They go ahead and make it 205. So in this spot, I think it's another interesting spot, whether we want to raise and just try and stack my opponent if they do have queen jack or a set, or whether we want to play it cool and just flat here. I think between the two options, calling is better. And the only reason I say that is we really want to protect our range here. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to have all the overpairs, an ace queen. And if we're only defending bets with those hands, things are going to get pretty dicey when my opponent does have flushes, sets, and 2 pairs in their range as well. So we definitely need some more nutted hands to defend here, and I think the king high flush is a good hand to do it with. So I lay a bit of a trap. I decide to call here, and then we're heads up to a river, which is the 2 of hearts. Pretty gross river, to be 100% honest with you. If my opponent did flop a set, they now sucked out on us, and I think they might be aware of this because they go ahead and bet 500. So not totally in love with this bet now. I think the option of raising for value has probably gone off the table. I mean, there's some merit to trying to stack a worse flush, but I think when the board pairs on the river, that becomes a bit dicey. So I think we're either bluff catching or hero folding, and I really don't like folding against a loose aggressive opponent, particularly when like the open-ended straight draws, like the other combinations of king 10, 10-9 suited, it did miss. And my range does look like it has a lot of hands that are like ace queen through pocket aces in it, so I wouldn't think it's totally inconceivable that they're betting a worse flush for value. So that leaves me with one option. I throw in the call, then the opponent says good call. They show 10-9 of spades. So there we go. We show our hand and we end up raking in this big pot. Good heart from the villain. It's rare to see some bluffs in Tampa, and this might have worked if I had ace queen through aces, but when I do protect my range with some stronger flushes, they're not going to get the bluff through on them. Let's see if we can keep the run good going in this next hand. We see 2 limpers, then I'm in the cutoff with pocket 9s. I go ahead and make it 30, and then a tight aggressive button goes ahead and 3-bets it to 100. And then interestingly, a shorter stacked passive small blind cold calls the 100. The action folds back to me here, and I definitely think calling is the right option, particularly against a tight aggressive 3-bet in Tampa. It's a strong range, and I'm not trying to dump off my stack yet, particularly when we're over 2,000 effective. So I throw in the call, and then we are 3 ways to a flop of 10-10-4 rainbow. The small blind checks it over to me, check it over to the pre-flop aggressor, who goes ahead and c-bets 75. The short stack gets out the way. I think I just have to call here. There might be some merit to raising just to deny equity to my opponent's ace-king, ace-queen combinations. Having said that, though, it is a tighter dynamic here in Tampa. I am somewhat worried that I'm behind, so I really don't want to push the equity. So I do just call. So we're heads up to a turn, which is a nice one. It's the 9 of clubs. Let's go. We do make a full house on the turn. And I honestly consider leading here just because I think a tighter opponent is going to check back a lot of their overpairs on the turn. I decide against it though, and I do check it over to the villain just because I think leading would be kind of face up. Not face up like we hit our set on the turn, but like face up that we have trips or stronger. So I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it and I should just be blasting for value. Let me know what you would do in the comments below. Again, it's another spot I could go either way. So we check it over to the villain, who unfortunately does check back. So we heads up to the river, which is the queen of clubs, putting out backdoor clubs. So now I absolutely think we have to go ahead and bet here. If my opponent does have aces or kings, they're definitely going to call a bet, and probably a big one too. But if those hands want to bet themselves, they're probably going to use a smaller size, and they definitely won't be calling a check raise. So yeah, I think we just absolutely have to go ahead and bet here. Want to make it a juicy one too. I go ahead and bet 425, and then the opponent thinks about it for a few seconds before throwing in the call. I show my hand and they end up mucking theirs. So I do think it's pretty likely they did have aces, kings, or jacks. Maybe even ace, queen. Happy that I got my big bet paid off on the river. But yeah, whether I should check or lead the turn, let me know what you would do in the comments. So we are deep into the session at this point. Honestly, the high hand promotion ended about 4 hours ago. We're just grinding for the love of the game. We're in a good game, we're running good, and I still don't want to face those emotional issues I've been talking about in the past few vlogs. We're still keen to grind into the late hours of this morning. Getting a bit tired though, so this will be the last interesting hand we play in the session. So we see 2 limpers, then the same loose aggressive opponent from the king 10 suited hand raises the cutoff yet again. They go ahead and make it 30. Then I'm on the button with ace jack offsuit. I go ahead and 3-bet it to 100. The limpers fold and the cutoff calls. So we're heads up to a flop of jack jack 5. No, I'm not joking. We smashed the flop yet again. Let's go. Trips on the flop in a 3-bet pot. When the villain checks it over to me, I go ahead and do this thing called value betting. I go ahead and make it 60, and then the villain calls. So we're still heads up to a turn, which is the jack of spades. No, I'm not joking. We turn quads. Let's freaking go. When the villain checks it over to me, I actually think this is a pretty interesting spot with what sizing we want to use. So because it's a loose aggressive opponent, I really would expect them to 4-bet their aces, kings, queens, maybe even pocket 10s combinations pre-flop. So I think the vast majority of their range is going to be full houses, pocket 9s through a 5x hand. And I just don't think those hands are really going to want to invest a lot more money in the pot, knowing that I'm going to have all of the stronger full houses. So part of me wants to down bet and give those hands a good price. Of course, this is kind of flawed in theory, because if your opponent has a weak range, like maybe you want to use bigger sizes to put pressure on them, but I really don't want to overthink it. I just want to take the highest EV line. So I go ahead and mix in a bit of a smaller bet. I make it 150, and then the villain calls. Let me know what you would do with sizing here though, because it is very interesting. And then we're heads up to a river, which is the 9 of hearts. The opponent checks it over to me, and my same reasoning with what size I want to use that I used on the turn still applies here on the river. I don't really think, even if the opponent does have like pocket 6s, pocket 7s, pocket 8s, I don't really think that the 9 will be that much of a scare card for them, because I don't think they'd expect me to bet a 9x. So they're either putting me on aces, kings, queens, a jack, or just a bluff with like ace, queen. So I think we do have to use another small sizing again, otherwise it is a bit too face up that we're nutted. So I go ahead and bet 300, and then the villain says out loud, well, I think I still beat value, and he throws in the call. I show my jack, and then the opponent show pocket queens, which I was like, wow, I really thought a loose aggressive opponent would 4-bet that hand pre-flop. So I was actually, despite winning a big pot, I was like, actually a bit disappointed I didn't use larger bet sizes, because if he's called to trap with this hand pre-flop, I don't think he's going to be folding to bigger sizes. So yeah, poker's crazy. Like everything goes your way, and I'm still a bit like, damn, I missed value there. Quadjacks was good enough to go on the board for the high hand, but the $2022 one had ended about 4 hours ago. But we did rake in a cheeky little $105 high hand to top off that massive pot after a massive session of running really, really good. After battling for 13 hours and 40 minutes of play, I was finally ready to call things a quit, go home and get some proper sleep. I was absolutely knackered at this point, not only from this 13-hour session today, and the previous day, and the 33 hours I played in the 3 days leading up to the New Year's Eve, but also just the poor sleep I got before coming and playing today. Felt very gross at this point, to be honest. You know that feeling where your teeth get all furry after playing poker for too long? Maybe that's just me, but I was ready to go home and get some sleep. Fortunately, my suffering wasn't for nothing, because after the 13 hours and 40 minutes of play, I ended up raking in a very cool $2,992 win on the session, and that's including that cheeky little high hand at the end there. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the vlog. That really helps my channel's analytics and it's greatly appreciated. If you want to check out any of this anti-gambling gambling club merchandise, make sure you go to leebets.com. We've got hats, hoodies, t-shirts, all for the anti-gambling gambling club. So if you want to join, head over to leebets.com and check it out. For now, I'm out of here. Peace.